Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Do you struggle with being negative? Most people struggle with being negative. Being positive takes action. Using simple positive actions will allow you to win each day. Being negative is a discharge in 3 key areas. Number 1, your mindset to achieve your goals. Number 2, your influence on self and others. And number 3, your ability to learn and grow. Implementing simple positive actions into your life will allow you to win each day. Being positive takes action. So let's work to be positive. To receive a weekly video email from me on one simple positive action, subscribe to the series by going to chargepodcast.com to get the link to register today. Life is short, so why live your life by default when you can live your life by design? Make it a great day. Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again today for another great guest. I'm telling you, our third quarter lineup has been stacked with experts that's really helping us decide how we can really put our message out there in the world and what we want to achieve and accomplish. And today, I think I've got that guest for you again that's going to really make you think. And I think that's the key. And how can you get better spoken word that's on a piece of paper? So before I introduce him, I'm going to ask Paul if he would share with us. Paul, what problem will you solve for our Charge Podcast listeners today?
Thanks, Gary. I would say that the number one problem people have is understanding the difference between writing a book and spreading a message. And what our clients continually tell us is that there's more to it than just writing. And they discovered that through the process that we take them through, that it's actually about being very strategic and thoughtful and aware of the fact that there's a human being on the other end of the line reading that copy. And you need to be very clear, very concise, and very helpful in the message that you spread. Otherwise, what's the point? You may as well not bother to begin with.
Excellent. Well, I told you that's why Paul's going to make us think, because it's about sometimes we think the spoken word's the only thing, but really it's about what we write. And especially as leaders in our organizations, we do writing all the time. So if you're wondering if this applies to you, I guarantee it does. We may talk about book, but we're going to just talk about writing in general and how it impacts people. Because Paul Edwards is the founder and CEO of the Reluctant Thought Leader. Messages that matter for people who need to read them. Authentically channeling the voice of the impact-driven speaker, coach, or an executive, or that entrepreneur in print and written word. He is a husband, father, mentor to young adults, and a follower of the Messiah. He's an amateur bodybuilder and author of the Influencer Networking Secrets. Paul, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Great to be here, Gary, and thanks so much for having me.
Well, I have to admit, Paul and I've got to know each other a little bit because we are in a mastermind together and we're always trying to learn. And that's why I love doing the podcast, Paul, is I love being able to share with others things that maybe they haven't thought about before. And in that spoken word, like you talked about, is if we're reluctant in a message, then we're not going to really impact the person that's reading that message. And if it's in a book or if it's in an email or any other message that's there. So let's start off with maybe, how do you authentically channel someone's voice into that written word?
Yeah, so the short answer is that I grew up as the mimic. I was the guy who did the impressions of everybody in whatever social group I was in, and impressions of celebrities and all that kind of stuff, and people loved it. I was also preternaturally, I would say, gifted with words. My father was an obsessive writer, wrote all his life. I also had quite a bit of influence from my mother's side, and I grew up writing stories, writing lyrics, being obsessed with words. being grammatically advanced. I was a grammar Nazi, is what people would have called me back then. And so you take those two together, and then you find all of a sudden you find yourself in the modern digital marketplace where there are busy entrepreneurs, influencers, thought leaders who know they need to write. Their pain is they're behind by months on spreading that message in print or online. And lo and behold, there's somebody who can interview them, listen to them, write a piece of content, and read it back to themselves, do it while doing an impression of them, right? To make sure that it sounds like it came from them. So I'm able to be like a chameleon and become you on paper. And I also figured out I could teach other people to do this, even if they didn't have the gift of mimicry. So my team, not all of them can imitate other people's voices, but they can watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, read previous content you've written, and channel that into fresh content or a new book.
Yeah, and that becomes so vital, because I tell you, so many people, they won't write because they feel like they don't have that talent. But today in the marketplace, it's demanding it, because with blogs, with books, and that's how you get your information out. As you know, I've done 4 books, but that's been my greatest challenge, is the written word. I love speaking, and I can speak easily, but sitting down to write and put that message together, I'll be honest, I'm challenged, and you've helped me in that with some of the things you've shared with me over time, but that becomes such a challenge. Now I have to, before I miss this opportunity, because I think I've heard you once, but you said you do impressions. So can I put you on the spot and you give us an impression? Because we got to have fun with this podcast too.
Yeah. Well, I only hesitate to say because there are people I cannot mimic, right? There are people that, sure, like their voice is just, it's foreign to me. But there were people, our mutual friend Aaron Walker, Big A, right, was my premier first client, and that's a very easy one for me to access, because he has a very distinct way, a thick Tennessee drawl, and all that energy that he brings. So he would, I would watch his videos, and after a while, I sort of memorized the script. He would start them off all the same way. So he'd be walking through the Station Camp Greenway there in his neighborhood in Nashville, and he'd say, "Hey guys, Big A coming to you live from the Station Camp Greenwood. What a beautiful day it is out here. Hope you're having a great day." And so when I would write a piece of content, right, you're always worried about, am I sounding more like Paul Edwards or am I sounding more like Aaron Walker? Well, what I would do is I would, I'd write and say, "Let me tell you why I think this is important for you to know." And then as I'm writing it and reading it back to myself, I can hear, oh, I'm using a word that he knows what that word means, but he would never use it. Or I'm saying, that sounds exactly like what he would say. In fact, sometimes I was tempted, because of the whole Southern thing, to research online Southernisms, the things that only Southerners say, and West Coast guys like me sound silly when we say it, right? But and I was able to use a few of them, and a few of them made sense, but I could sense when I was going overboard and exaggerating his character to the point of caricature. So it comes with just an attentive ear to the way people speak, and then and then being just fastidious about the content that you write and making sure that it sounds like he wrote it. And I found that he wasn't the only person I could do that for.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, because number one, you did a great impression, because of course I know Big A, and several other people that's probably going to listen to the podcast is going to say, "Yep, that's him." But the thing is you've not just captured the voice, you've captured him of what type he would be. So that's the thing for us leaders. Sometimes we think we have to do it all. We don't have to. And I think that kind of really comes into my next question I was going to ask you. When you say or mean reluctance, and how do people overcome that? Because sometimes they think, well, if I didn't write that, but then of course they don't write, then it's not me. But there's people out there that do. What you do is a gift, and that's really makes it easier for us as a person that wants to be a thought leader to be able to have our spoken word out into the world.
Yeah. Well, the word reluctant actually describes several things all in one word or in one phrase when you add thought leader to it. And that is, number one, it describes me, because I am actually one. I am actually a reluctant thought leader. Second, it describes all of my clients. For one reason or another, it's not always anxiety over an inability to write or etc. In many cases, they're perfectly talented writers. They're not. There's just not enough hours in the day.
Right.
And so they realize, I have to find someone I can delegate this to. In other cases, they're reluctant to trust someone with their message. They're concerned that it will be misconstrued or steered in a direction that it was never intended for. And so that's why we're very selective on our end about who we work with. You have to be that possessed of that mindset of constant personal growth, personal development. It really helps if you're faith driven, according to the Judeo-Christian tradition. We work with a lot of people in that because that's who I am. But it's, and then there are people who are not particularly invested in that, but nonetheless, they still have that mindset of personal growth, personal development, always getting better, always making other people better. And if you're a people builder leader, regardless of what industry you're in, you're going to fit pretty well with what we do. And that's the other piece of it. I'm not only capturing the voice and what it sounds like, I'm also capturing what that voice conveys to the world. And part of the reason is because that's what my voice conveys to the world. So I understand the lingo, right? And that's very helpful too.
Yeah, that is so important because, what we're sharing out there. And today, we're sharing it in so many different ways. We're sharing it through, like we've talked about, books, but we're also sharing it through blog posts and how you can get traction in your company. And so many companies, that's where, if you're listening to this as a leader and you think, well, I own a company, but, we don't do any blogging or anything. Well, you're missing. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber or if you're a, electrician or what. Is a small business owner, which is a lot of my clients and a lot of people that listen to this podcast, is you can make a big difference if you are doing those things in the marketplace, because most likely your competition is not.
Yeah. When it comes down to, as I told somebody this the other day that said, what's the advantage? How do I make it stand out? How do I bring a competitive advantage to whatever content we might create together? Yeah. In other words, how do I make sure I'm not just writing content that's going nowhere? And I said, that's a marketing strategist question, not a content creator question. When it comes to the content creator question, right, it's very binary. You're either doing it or you're not. If you're not, you're guaranteed to miss it every single time. If you are, you have a shot of gaining traction and credibility and all of the perception in the marketplace of expertise that you have. So when people come to me and say, well, will my blogs, if I have you write my blogs, will they take off? I say, no, you make your blogs take off by the marketing strategy that you follow. I make them sound like they were written by you because you don't have time, or maybe you're just not very good with writing to begin with, to get it done. And that's worth the investment. That is, if you're lacking in the other areas, if you're doing a business that requires an immense amount of concentration and focus, and you just don't have time to do this, and yet by doing it, you could multiply the impressions. Yeah. I mean, it's worth it.
Yeah, that's for sure, because of, there's only so much time. And of course, if it's one of those challenges they have, then people tend to delay it. And really, it's what we're talking about throughout this podcast. And one of the things I think is important, there may be some people think they can write and they want to be able to write, and you are willing to share some steps, what people should follow to kind of beat that writer's block and kind of get their message moving. So we've talked about they have the opportunity. If they don't have the time, that's what you're here for. But also, if they think they can beat that writer's block, what are some things they can do to really get their message and be able to beat that writer's block?
Yeah. This is one of the most powerful discoveries I made. You don't have to believe in the opening pages of the Bible to use this. So freebie for you if you're not a believer, but I'm going to reference it because that's where I got the idea. So there's this this interesting pattern that keeps happening in the first 30 some odd verses of Genesis, where it says, and there was evening and there was morning the second day, and there was evening and there was morning the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, right? Keeps repeating, and by the second or third time you're like, yeah, I get that part, right? Yeah, there was evening, there was morning. Okay, you don't need to keep saying it. But it's not just a narrative, it's also an instruction manual. It's actually telling you something about how creative work is actually done. There are intermissions. There is flow state creative work, and then there's a break. And then there's flow state creative work, and then there's a break. Well, what most writers do is they attempt to do the whole thing in one fell swoop. And in fact, one of my managing editor on my team, Cody, came to me with the same problem. He said, I'm dreading writing this blog. It's going to take me 4 hours. I said, how long is this blog? He said, same as we usually write. I said, Cody, you should be able to get that knocked out in 45 minutes. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, listen, tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to outline what you're going to write. Just outline. I'm not saying write it. I'm just saying outline it. Okay. Before you go to bed, and then drop your pen, close your eyes, get a good night's sleep, let your subconscious ruminate on it, wake up in the morning, and then you write it. And he said, well, what the hell? I got nothing to lose. So Cody did that. 2 days later, I get a message from him. I just wrote 2 blogs in 45 minutes. I said, now you're learning, boyo, right? 2 weeks later, I get a message. He said, I wrote an entire book chapter in an hour and a half. Now, this is not parade pretty writing. There's editing that needs to be done for it, right? This is not like you're ready to go to press. I'm just saying you have something to work with. You have a draft that you can read out loud to yourself and say, does this flow nicely? Does it sound smooth? Do the ideas connect to each other? Am I writing about what we originally intended to write about? And I said, and that's the whole thing. That's editing level. What we're talking about here is just getting your thoughts out of your head and onto paper where they can begin to impact another human being. They don't have it. Otherwise, it's just potential energy. There's nothing kinetic about it, right? So that's been a big game changer for Cody as well as the rest of the team. We're teaching them, you should not be spending more than about 45 to 60 minutes writing this. If it's an average blog, and if it's a book chapter, maybe an hour and a half just to draft, right? And we have a whole system, which, by the way, we're going to include for all of your listeners that they can download. That'll take them through this, right, step by step, and it's easy. It's 5 steps.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and we'll have that. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. When you talk about blogs, Paul, people have heard those, and one thing I'm hearing in the business world again, and of course it becomes a little more from the marketing side, but you're doing from the writing side is, they've never left us, but actually it seems to me within the last year to 24 months that it's come back even stronger, that the spoken word and that blog side of it, because the thing is, it's there forever. And we're seeing some of the analytics is making a very important part for you to have that, to be able to be recognized as a thought leader. So I guess I'm curious, just what have you seen in the marketplace when you're working with your clients with like blogging? What is that typical, or what are you seeing that you think is length of what a blog should be? I know there's no perfect answer, but what are you seeing that really is the best for your clients?
I don't know how much it's changed, Gary, in the last several years, last several months. I don't know if it's ever gone away. People are with the way our attention is such precious real estate in the world of media today. People most often want to know, when they encounter a piece of content, what is this about? And so the less vague you are, right? Now, if you are an established global brand that almost everybody recognizes, you can write whatever title you want to, and people will read it. If you're Bill Gates or, you know, the Kardashians or what, you can make up these flowery titles all you want to, and people will read it. Yeah, great. But if you're the average person who's trying to build credibility, you need to tell people this is what this article is about, and that's what the subject line or the title, right, is for. And then I would lead off basically just with a paragraph or two explaining what we're talking about. Tell people what it is. Also tell people what it isn't. The easiest way to know what you are is to know what you're not, right? Same thing with the subject that you're writing about. The next thing is you got to tell people why. Why does this matter? Why should they pay attention? What's it got to do with them? Why do they need to pay attention to this, for example, before they pay attention to this thing? One example is if I'm writing a blog to say you should not write content until you've done these three things, and one of those things is a marketing strategy. So I'm going to point out to them, you need to have that marketing strategy rock solid in your head. This is what we're going with. You know, we'll tweak it on the way if we have to, but this is our start point. Because if you don't, you're going to be expecting me as the content creator to generate results without a strategy. And just charging ahead, pardon the pun, without a strategy is a fool's errand. And 2 months from now, you're going to call and say, never mind, I don't want to do this. Then I don't want to start. I'm like, nope. Anyway, that's beside the point. The third thing you got to do is you got to tell them how. You got to tell people, okay, if I'm going to tell you, you should pay attention to this and here's why, then I'm going to tell you, here's a couple of practical steps you can take. So if I'm going to tell you, here's, marketing strategy is important. You got to have that done before you do it. And you're not a marketing strategist. I'm not going to tell those people how to do their job. I'm going to tell the person who's not a marketing strategist. Then you need to ask yourself these three questions, or you need to take these three steps, or you need to have this series of conversations. And then at the end, I'm going to have a call to action. If you want to know more, if you've checked off all of these and you're ready to begin writing content, then you can call me. Yeah. I really think that's a very fair and honest way to do it. You're not presenting yourself to the marketplace, but at the same time, you are in the vein of they ask, you answer. You're telling people what they need to know, why they need to know it, and how they can apply it.
Yeah. And I know you do that because you actually referred me to get my marketing strategy down. It's been one of the challenges with my mastermind. I've got an Ascend mastermind. I talked about it some on this podcast, not a lot, but I am focusing in more and more on that. And I'm kind of making that shift within my business. And you told me, you've really got to have a strategy. You've got to get that strategy first before you can really put the other pieces. And I was trying to do the other blocks ahead of it. And it was causing a conflict because I really didn't have that avatar identified. And I think that's so crucial. Now, Paul, since I've got you on, and since you're a fellow mastermind member of mine, or not of mine, but in the mastermind group that I'm in and stuff, can you share with audiences, because I want to go ahead and approach this subject because I've had some other mastermind members on, is why do you belong to a mastermind?
The idea was immediately appealing to me when I first started seeing certain people I knew talk about it or build groups like that, simply because I had to learn the business of networking when I was in the insurance business in my 30s. And I always found that if I could get into a room full of people who had somewhat between somewhat and close to a similar mindset to me, or a similar set of priorities, or a similar values, whatever, there was always something good that came out of it. Then you build in those features like we have in ISI, right, of transparency, authenticity, and vulnerability. And you're baking in eternal principles that have benefited mankind for as long as we've been alive. There's no question in my mind, Gary, that again, referring back to Genesis, it's not good for a man to be alone. What's the point of being a self-made man, as they call it. Look at what you have to go through and who you have to step on to do that. I don't want to live life like that.
Right.
I would rather cause a flow of positive energy, sometimes in the form of new business, yes, but it can be more than that, by living a virtuous life reinforced by a cadre of people who have my back, and be content with that, than become, you know, the celebrity and ultra millionaire world is littered with them, people who were willing to just chop other people's heads off to get to where they are, and when they got to the end of it, they still weren't happy. I'm not interested. Thanks, you can keep it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, because I just want people to know that's the reason. There's reasons for business owners to get in masterminds. The other thing it does, it gives you like-minded individuals, and you have your own peer of advisors, board of directors, whatever word you want to use there, that really makes a benefit to your business. Because as business owners, we really aren't accountable, I should say, to anyone. Besides, of course, the results that we're getting. And sometimes we can get our own head that way. And if you want to learn more about that, go to myascendmastermind.com and we'll give you more details, and we'll have links in the show notes. But Paul, I want you to share with them, you said you would be willing to share that PDF kind of writing success toolkit with them. Where would they go to get that?
I have a link. I'll send you right after we finish recording, okay, Gary, so you can put it in the show notes. I have a link to where they can download it. It's not actually, I take that back. I do have an easy URL to remember. I don't use it very often, so I forgot about it. If you go to getyourbookmoving.com, that's where you can download it. You just enter your email. I'm not a big, don't freak out. I'm not going to send you 50 emails a week. I don't do business that way. I'm not knocking people who do. It's just not my style. So don't worry. Yes, it is a subscription list, but you might not hear from me for a year. But you will get the IP5 method, as we call it, intellectual property 5 method. And that'll come straight to you, and you can download it, and off you go. And if you need more help, you can always reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. And we have a website as well, reluctant-thought-leader.com, where you can go and learn more about our agency.
And we'll have all that in show notes. And remember, you can get all that at chargepodcast.com, because we know our chargers are not sitting there just waiting to write down something, that they're busy folks, and they're either driving right now, doing something that's very active, and we appreciate them listening. So we make it easy for you to be able to get that information that Paul shared with you. Paul, I would also like to ask you 2 recharge round questions that we ask every guest. And the first one is charge. Of course, that's my mantra of create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think's led to success in your life?
Certainly, I would say slowing down what most people do at breakneck speed. Slowing down decision-making, right, through a mastermind. Having a group of people that you force yourself to run those decisions through the ringer. Another one, it would be journaling. I get a whole bunch of junk out of my system by writing it in a journal. And yes, I have a predilection that way, being the Enneagram 4 that I am. But you can do it privately and keep it hidden away, and nobody needs to know it, right? I personally don't care. People read my journals. They're so heavy, you'll get tired after the first paragraph or 2. But for me, it's enormously therapeutic. It's enormous. It's a huge expulsion of all kinds of uncertainty and all kinds of, random thoughts. And it gets me down to the nitty-gritty so that I can focus throughout the rest of my day.
Excellent. One last question for you. We've all had failures, and we'd love to have a do-over, but we don't get the do-over in life besides the changes that we decide to make. What's one of those failures that, if you had to do it over again, that you would change?
Very timely question. And the reason I say that is because failure itself is how I interpreted failure is what I would do over, and what I'm doing differently now. meaning that I would interpret it as a personal flaw or as a character defect. Like, I messed up because I'm a selfish, ignorant fool, right? Who didn't see it coming, who was too wrapped up in his own head. And I've said, you know what? I've done that. I've tried it that way for 4 decades. It's not working. All I get is more pain. So I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to start interpreting my failures as though they were successes, right? This is a perfectly good era in which to do that. We are now regularly in the habit of comparing oranges and apples as though they were equals when they're clearly not. Why don't I get to do that, right? I'm not hurting anybody. So I'm saying, yesterday I meant to go to my accountant's office and I drove straight past it 3 times before I realized I'd forgotten it. And on the 4th time, I finally went like I was supposed to. But the first 3 times I said, that's a win. That's a win. I'm not going to regard it as a failure anymore, because all I get is pain when I do. So
good advice. Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Paul, again, share with them your website address, and we'll have it all in show notes for them. And then we'll also have where, if they want the IP5, how to be able to access that information.
Sure. So for the IP5, to kickstart your writing, go to getyourbookmoving.com. And for our agency, to learn more about that, you can go to reluctant-thought-leader.com.
And we'll have that all in show notes at chargepodcast.com. Chargers, I hope that you really take, what is the spoken word that's in you that you need to get out? That was really what we're talking about today, is how you can get that message out. And if you're struggling as a thought leader to be able to do it, it happens. So that's where Paul comes in and helps you with that spoken word that's there. So Paul, we thank you for being on the Charge podcast today.
Gary, thanks for having me. It's so good to be here.
Chargers, now the question is, what will you do with the information that you learned today? The thing is, you've got to take action. Here's the suggestion I'll give you, just what Paul said. Just start journaling. Start putting your thoughts on paper. And if it's not on paper, put it electronically. But I've found that if you really take those thoughts and put those down, it makes writing easier. It's really that outline that Paul was talking about the night before. What are some things that's within inside of you that you want to have come out? And I think if you do that, you will start seeing that you can really put your spoken word into written word. And that becomes the key, because then we can share that message with the world. So come back next week. We'll have another great guest. Remember, like and share this and send it to 3 people that you know that would benefit from this. You probably know somebody that wants to write a book. Paul does book writing also. So get in touch with him there, and you can put that spoken word and you can be an author. And guess what? You're talking through this book. So it is your book. All they're doing is helping you craft the message so you can do the spoken word in the right method. So come back next week, Chargers, and we'll have another great guest. See you next week.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.